Now let's see how to use Apache Spark to read data from a relational database system. In this case, we are going to use the JDBC option of the format method. As you can see right now, I am in PostgreSQL, which is a popular RDBMS system. In my current database, I have a database called DVD rental that represent an old school rental service for DVDs. This was before Netflix and Amazon came out, I guess. So I have a table called Hector where that contains the name of hectares, and they also have some IDs and the last time they were updated. So this is a quick overview of the database. You have the addresses, the category, city, the movies. Each movie has an ID and a title, and there's also a third table for that linked hectares to movies. So for example, let's take a look into this one. As you can see, the actor with the ID number 1 is linked to the movie with the ID number 1. So, and here, let's take a look down here. Here I've created a user called Spark user. I'm going to use this user to connect to the database and read data from the tables. Property, definition, privileges. So I create a user, and it is a super user. He can do almost everything, but this is just for demo purposes. Please don't do that. So let's see how to use Apache Spark and .NET for Apache Spark to read table from an RDBMS system. So into Visual Studio. Here I'm Visual Studio, where I already made some preparation. So you are already aware of this. To do anything in Apache Spark, we need a Spark session. So you create a Spark session, and this is the host name. In this case, it's localhost. My database is running on port number 5433, and the database name is DVD rental. The user we are going to use to connect to the database is Spark user with the brilliant password Spark user. So now this part is where we build a JDBC URL that we will then pass to Apache Spark. So this is the shape of the URL. First, you specify what database you are going to use. For example, if this were in MySQL, then you will write something like this: JDBC MySQL. But in this case, we are connecting to a Postgres database, so I specify JDBC Postgres, and then the host name, it's localhost on which port the machine is running. Then we passed in the database name, the user, and the password. So these are the minimal settings necessary to connect to a database using a JDBC URL. Next, we start with the read method and the format method. On the format method, we specify that we are going to use a JDBC connection string. So we pass in the option JDBC. Next, we have to tell him what are the connection settings. So URL, JDBC URL. Then the table we want to query data from. Please note that here we have to pass the full table name. So the schema and the table. Let's take a look back here. This is the public schema, and the table is hectare. That's why we have this. Public is the schema name and actor is the name of the table. And then we use the load method without any parameter. This is where, so this overload of the where method is for data sources that doesn't need a path. For example, a JDBC URL. Next, after reading, we can then print the schema and take a look into data to make sure that our settings are correct. So let's take a look. I first build this one. Then it's time to run it. So I already run it multiple times, but let me first let's run it again. Here you will notice you have to pass in a driver class. So you have to download the JDBC URL for Postgres and then tell Apache Spark where this class is located. So the first thing, you specify Spark subnet, then the driver class, and then the jars where the classes that contains the classes. Then the classic, the class, the .NET runner, the master, and the DIL that contains our program logic. In this case only. While this thing is building, let's take a look into this. Let me check quickly. Generic load method. Spark. We are looking for JDBC. So here you can read all necessary information. As you can see how to build the URL, and somewhere here they should have exactly here. So this is, you have to pass in the driver class path and the jars that contains the class. So for this you must go to the, you can look for Postgres SQL JDBC driver. And here you can then download a version, save it somewhere on your system, and then tell Apache Spark where the data are located. So in my case, the data are located here. So that is it. Now you can see that the data were read. It reads the data, read everything from the database, then set first name. The schema was also inferred as usual, and we got here a first view of the data. We can check if this data are real and are coming from the database. So let's make a quick query from the DVD rental. Say query tool. Let's select everything from public actor. Let's say limit 20. I guess this was showing only 20. Yeah, limit 20. Order by ID descending, limit 20. Why? See? Good. So here you have the data. Let's check if actor ID. Actor ID, order by actor ID. Good. Now you can see the actor with the ID 1 is Penelope Guinness, and it's the same here, Penelope Guinness, Nick Walbert at Chase. So here you are having, it's the same data. The 21st one was read into a data frame. Was loaded into a data frame. So that's the minimal you can do to read data from an RDBMS, and then do further querying. So now let's say you don't want to read all data in the table actor, but you just want to read a subset of the data. For example, all actor with the last name starting with, let's say, the letter last name, let's say M. So to do that, we can pass another option here. The option is the query one, the query option, and pass in a valid SQL query. So from public actor where the last name is like, I start with M, my last name start with M. And first, this query will not work. I tell you why, because you are not allowed, it's not allowed to use the table option together with the query option. So you have to use either one, this one or this one. That's why I remove this one. But before we let Apache Spark try this first, let us take a look if this is a valid query or not. Yep, as you can see, only actors with the last name starting with M were returned. So we are going to pass the same query to Apache Spark, and yeah, it's the same query. Now let's build it and run it. So now it ran successfully, and we can see that in the return data frame, all returned actors have a last name starting with M. We can also pass a complex query here. Instead of just selecting from one table, we can pass in a query that joins multiple tables, and then use this as data frame for further processing. Let's try it by writing a simple query that joined actors with their movie and also show some ratings. To do that, first let's write a query in pgadmin. So I will say we are looking for select, let's concat here the actor first name, first name, you want to class name, we call this actor. Let's run it. Okay, it's working. Then we are left. We are going to use a left join here so that in case where there's an actor without movie, the actor is still returned. So left joined. What's the other table? Is film actor. This is a connection table that connects an actor with all the movies they played. So left join film. Let's cut it. It's film actor. Let's write it. Public. Font. Film actor. Just cut it. FA on FA punct actor ID. This was a nice thing. I never use this punct. Now left join. Now we have actor linked with this. Now these are the movies. Film left join public film F on F punct film ID slash this one. Run it. Of course, now it's running. Actor. Now you say F punct title, film title, and F punct rating. Let's run it. Good. Now we have actors, movies they played, and the ratings of the movies. So let's pass this query to .NET for Apache Spark. It's a little bit complex one, so let's create a variable here called SQL query. SQL query equal this one. Yeah, plus this one, plus this one. What is missing here? Remove this and call it SQL query. Let's build and run this. Okay, there is an error. Let's take a look. What is this? Missing from close from. Let me check the query again. You have to put empty spaces at the end, otherwise I think it's looking like this instead of left join. So let's put some empty spaces and build it again. Let's run it. Good, it's running again. Now you can see that we created a data frame with 3 columns, actor, title, and rating, all from data type string. And this is a sample of the data frame. So this is how you can pass in a complex query. Just make sure that you don't have little mistakes, errors in like concatenating string without putting empty space at the end. Otherwise, the SQL string will result and it will be an invalid one because it's invalid. So now let's go back to this query here. This select stem from public actor limit 10. And then we then take a look into the schema. So what I'm going to do here, we'll first take a quick look at the schema of the table and then pass in a custom schema. So let's check quickly into Postgres. We can see here for the table actor, I think property definition. So the data type of the last update column is timestamp. So Apache Spark also infer it correctly. We saw, let's check, let's take a look at it right now. So what I'm going to do is to build this. Good. So let's say we don't want to use a timestamp here, but a date. So instead of having the year 2013, May 2013 with the date time, we just want this part. So we can accomplish it by passing in, there's an option for that called custom schema. So we can do option, I think the name is custom. Let's take a look to the documentation. Custom schema. There we go. So we can pass in a custom schema and just leave the other field untouched. So let's try it. Here I have custom schema. Go in here, custom schema. I want to change the schema of the field. What's the name of the field? Last update is a date and not a timestamp. This is just so that I can read it. Great. Let's get it built. Let's run it again and see if the schema, we don't need this one right now. Just want to check if the schema changes were applied. Now as you can see, everything remains the same. So actor remained an integer, first name is string, last name is string, but the column last update was now defined as a date column instead of a timestamp column. So we can, I think we can change it here, so and then check a look how it looks like now. Okay, there we go. The last update is now a date as defined here instead of date time, as you can see before we passed in a custom schema. There's also a lot of, as always, there's a lot of options available. I really recommend you to go around and play a little bit. This one is quite important for, it's quite important when you are partitioning your table. Let's say you want the data frame to be partitioned by last update, then you must specify a date, the range with lower bound and upper bound, the number of partitions, and also how many data you want the JDBC URL to be fetching each time. So I encourage you to go around and take a look into the documentation and read a little bit. There's also here, you can see, where is it? I think there's one here for JDBC. Let me take a look. Yep, exactly. Also take a look into the data frame reader API, where you can read about how the JDBC method works. I think it's quite straightforward, and the documentation is also very well written. So this is how you can use Apache Spark for .NET for Apache Spark to read data from a SQL database. See you next time.